"This store is already dead," her mother said loud, cold, right in the middle of the boutique floor, in front of customers, in front of staff. "And the only man keeping you from seeing that is the one you threw away 8 months ago." Claire didn't cry. She didn't argue. She stood there holding a silk blouse she'd been folding. While every person in that room pretended not to hear the woman who was supposed to love her, most tear her apart in public and use the name of a man Claire hadn't spoken to in 8 months as the weapon. That same night she showed up on his porch. If that makes your blood boil, you are not alone. Before we go any further, if stories about real love, real heartbreak, and the kind of courage it takes to rebuild your life speak to you, please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all began. I want to tell you something about the night I found her there. Not the soft version, not the cleaned up, made-for-television version, where I say something poetic and we both cry a little and everything feels like it was meant to be. I want to tell you the real version, the one where my hands were cold and my chest was tight, and the first thing I actually thought when I saw her wasn't "I've missed you," but rather "what in God's name happened to you?" It was a Tuesday late, past midnight by the time I pulled off the highway and took the back roads into Asheville, the kind of roads that wind through old neighborhoods where the oak trees have been growing for 100 years and the porches are lit by single yellow bulbs. I had the heat running in the car, even though it was late April, because spring in the mountains never quits. It always keeps one foot in winter. I was on the phone with Noah. Noah Parker, 26 years old, the youngest researcher on my team at the Charlotte office, the kind of kid who sends emails at 11 at night with subject lines like "quick thought" that are never quick and never just one thought. I genuinely liked him. But that night I was 44 minutes past when I should have ended our call, and we were still arguing about a campaign for an outdoor apparel brand that had been slowly bleeding money for 3 months. "The data supports a push into the Pacific Northwest market," Noah was saying. "The demographics align, the purchase patterns." I turned onto my street. "Close your laptop. I just want to show you one more." "Close it. Go home, sleep." I pulled into my driveway. "The numbers will be exactly the same in the morning." He laughed a little, tired and wired, the way young men are when they think working past midnight is the same thing as working well. I knew the feeling. I had spent the better part of 15 years mistaking exhaustion for dedication. I wasn't going to let him make the same mistake, if I could help it. "Good night, Noah," I said. "Good night, Lucas." I ended the call. And that is when I saw it. At first I thought someone had left a bag of clothing on my porch. Honestly, that was my first thought, that someone had dropped off donations at the wrong address, or that Maya from next door had left something she'd borrowed. My porch light was on, the way I always leave it, and in that yellow glow I could see fabric. A bundle of it, soft colors, flowers. Then the bundle moved. I sat in my driveway for a full 5 seconds without getting out of the car, because I recognized those flowers. She had worn that dress the last summer we were together. A floral wrap dress, pale yellow background, small blossoms in blue and rose. She had worn it to the farmer's market on a Saturday morning, and I had teased her about it. Said she was trying to become a garden, and she had thrown a peach at me from across a produce stand, and we had laughed until the vendor asked us to please move along. I sat in my car and stared at that dress and told myself I was wrong, that it was a coincidence, that dozens of women in Asheville probably owned dresses with flowers on them, and I was sleep-deprived and projecting. I got out of the car anyway. I walked up the porch steps as quietly as I could, which in retrospect makes no sense. Why was I trying not to startle someone who was apparently sleeping against my front door? I don't know. Instinct, maybe. Or fear. I crouched down, and I looked at her face. Claire Monroe. Her hair was half out of whatever she'd put it in that morning. One strand was across her cheek, caught at the corner of her mouth. Her face was pale isn't the right word, emptied. Like she had been running on something all day, and it had finally run out, all at once there on my porch. Her eyelashes were dark against her skin. Her lips were slightly parted. She was breathing steadily, deeply, the way people breathe when they are truly, utterly spent. Her left hand was wrapped around a brass key. I knew that key. Not from our time together, I'd never had a copy of it. But I knew what it opened. It was the key to her boutique on Lexington Avenue, the store she had spent 3 years building from a dream and 2 credit cards into something real, something hers. Something she talked about with a particular kind of love she never quite used for anything else. She was holding it like she was afraid someone would take it in the night. Her phone was lit on the porch beside her, not ringing, vibrating. Over and over. The name on the screen was Mom, and then a minute later it changed to D, and then it went back to Mom again. I stood up. I looked at my front door, which she was blocking. I looked at my car, which I could technically get back into and drive away. I crouched back down and I said quietly, "Claire." She didn't move, Claire. A little louder, she inhaled sharply. Her hand tightened around the key. Then her eyes opened slowly. And then all at once and for exactly 3 seconds, she had no idea where she was. I could see it on her face. Complete disorientation. She looked at the porch railing, then at the yellow light above us, then at me. The confusion on her face was replaced almost immediately by something I can only describe as mortification. She pulled her knees to her chest. She looked away. Then she looked back, like she was hoping I had been an illusion that would disappear if she gave it a second chance. I was still there. "Lucas," she said. Her voice was rough from sleep and probably from whatever kind of day she'd had before she ended up here. "Hi," I said. That was it. That was all I had. 8 months of silence between us, and the first thing I said to her was hi. She closed her eyes for a second. I can explain. "Okay." She stopped. She looked at the key in her hand like she'd forgotten it was there. I didn't have anywhere else to go. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to ask her why my porch. Why tonight? Why after 8 months of nothing, no calls, no texts, not even a message through a mutual friend. I wanted to ask her if she knew what those 8 months had felt like from where I was standing. I wanted to ask her 100 things. Instead I said, "Guest room or couch?" She looked at me for a long moment. "What?" she said. "If you're staying tonight," I said. "Guest room or couch?" The couch is more comfortable than it looks, but the guest room has its own bathroom. Something moved across her face. I couldn't name it exactly. It wasn't relief, not quite. It was closer to the expression someone has when they've been braced for impact, and the impact doesn't come. "Guest room," she said, but she held up one hand. "Just tonight. I'm not. This isn't what it looks like." "What does it look like?" "Like I'm falling apart." "Are you?" She didn't answer that. She stood up instead, slowly, steadying herself against the railing. She was wearing flats, and one of them had come half off at some point, and she pushed it back on with the heel of her other foot without looking down. "I have 3 conditions," she said. I unlocked the front door. "Let's hear them. Just until morning. No questions about my parents or the store. And we are not, this is not," she seemed to be searching for a word. "A reconciliation," I offered. "Exactly." She exhaled like she'd been holding that word in her lungs. "None of that," agreed, I said. I pushed the door open. She stepped inside. I want to tell you what it felt like to watch her walk back into my house. Because it wasn't romantic. I'm not going to tell you it was romantic. What it was strange. The particular strangeness of seeing someone familiar in a space that has become unfamiliar to them. Watching her eyes move across the living room, noting what had changed, what hadn't. She stopped in front of the wall above the couch, and I knew what she was looking for before she found it. The painting she had talked me into hanging there, a mountain landscape in blues and grays, was still in the same spot. She hadn't expected that, I think. But the ceramic bowl she had kept on the kitchen counter, the one she made at that pottery class 3 years ago, lopsided, and deliberately so, because she'd said perfect bowls were boring, that was gone. I'd packed it away about 6 weeks after she left. Not because I was angry. Because looking at it first thing in the morning made me feel like I was failing some kind of test I hadn't signed up for. She noticed. I watched her notice. She didn't say anything about it. Her phone buzzed again on the kitchen counter, where she'd set it down. "Mom again." I started. "Don't answer it." I was going to say, "Do you want me to silence it so you can sleep?" She looked at the phone, then she looked at me. "Can you?" "If you want me to." "Yes," she said. "Please." I picked up the phone and silenced it, and set it face down on the counter. It was such a small thing. But the way she exhaled when I did it made me think it might have been the kindest thing anyone had done for her all day. I showed her where the towels were. I left a glass of water outside the guest room door. I told her goodnight. She said goodnight. She closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a moment afterward, and then I went to my own room, and I lay on top of the covers with my shoes still on, because I didn't trust myself to actually sleep, and I stared at the ceiling. What I thought about was the night she left. Not the last argument. We'd had plenty of those, the quiet kind, the kind that don't involve raised voices, but are somehow worse, the kind where both people are perfectly articulate and completely unreachable at the same time. No, I thought about the very last hour. The specific particular last hour. She had been in the bedroom packing a bag. Not a full suitcase, just a bag. Enough for a few days, though I didn't know at the time that a few days would become permanent. And I had been standing in the doorway, watching her fold a sweater with the careful, deliberate movements of someone who needs something to do with their hands. And I had completely, utterly known, that if I didn't say something in the next 30 seconds, she was going to walk out of that room and keep walking. I knew what I needed to say. I knew it the way you know a word that's on the tip of your tongue, right there, undeniable, just out of reach. I needed to say, I am terrified of losing you. I don't know how to do this without you. Please don't go. What I said instead was, the internet bill is in both our names. I can set up a new account, or we can arrange a transfer, whichever is easier for you. She stopped folding the sweater. She looked at me for a long time. Then she picked up the bag and walked past me. I didn't stop her. I have thought about that moment more times than I can count. I've thought about all the ways I could have rewritten it, what would have happened if I had said the true thing instead of the practical thing. But the truth is, in that moment the practical thing was the only thing I knew how to say. Because I had spent 40-some years learning that feelings were things you managed, contained, converted into action items. And I was very good at action items. What I was not good at, what I had never been taught to be good at, was saying out loud, to another human being, I am afraid. I lay on top of my covers and I thought about that. And eventually, sometime around 3 in the morning, I fell asleep. I woke up to the smell of coffee. It took me a second, the kind of second that happens in that gap between sleep and awake, when your brain hasn't assembled all the pieces yet, and then I remembered. I got up and went to the kitchen, and there was Claire, standing at my counter in different clothes. Clean jeans, a white shirt, a dark cardigan. She had clearly showered. Her hair was damp at the ends. She was holding a mug with both hands and staring out the window over the sink. I said, "You made coffee." She turned around. "I hope that's okay. I know where you keep it. I know you know where I keep it." A beat of something between us. Not quite awkward. Not quite comfortable. Something in between. "Maya brought me clothes," she said. I hadn't heard Maya come by, when early, 6-something. She came to the side door. Claire paused. "I called her last night. After you went to sleep. I didn't have anyone else's number memorized except hers. I absorbed that." "You could have called her first," I said. "Instead of coming here, I know. But you didn't." "No," she looked at her coffee. "I didn't." I poured myself a mug and leaned against the opposite counter. And we stood there like that for a moment, 8 feet apart in a kitchen we used to share, with the whole enormous question of why she had chosen my porch hanging in the air between us. She was the one who spoke first. "I need to go to the store," she said. "My parents are meeting me there at 9. "Okay. My mother wants me to move the boutique to Charlotte. My father wants me to renew the lease on the Lexington space. Neither of them." She stopped. She pressed her lips together. "Neither of them has asked me what I want." I waited. "They've been having this argument through me for 2 weeks," she said. I'm not a mediator. I'm not the person who gets to carry their disagreement back and forth like a..." She set down her mug with more force than she intended. The sound was sharp in the quiet kitchen. "Sorry. Don't apologize, I'm not." She straightened her shoulders. I just stopped again. Then she laughed, a short, unhappy sound. "I don't even have your number anymore. My old phone died in February and I lost half my contacts, and I realized last night that if I needed to call you, I couldn't." Something about that hit me harder than I expected. The idea that my number was gone from her phone. Not that she'd deleted it deliberately, just that it had disappeared, quietly, the way things disappear when you stop protecting them. "I'll give it to you," I said, "before you go." She nodded. She finished her coffee. She rinsed the mug and put it in the dish rack, the way she always used to do, and I noticed the way I noticed everything about her that morning. The same way you notice light through a window you thought was sealed shut. She picked up her keys from the counter. The brass key to the boutique was on the ring with the others. She looked at me. "Lucas," she said. "Last night. Thank you. You would have done the same." She hesitated. "Would I?" I thought about it honestly. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe. You've got a good heart, Claire. Even when you're trying to hide it." Something moved in her face. Quick and then gone. I'll see myself out, she said. She walked to the door. And here is the thing I need to tell you about that moment, because this is the part that mattered. As she reached for the door handle, I thought about all the things I could say. I thought about asking her to stay longer. I thought about telling her what the last 8 months had been. I thought about asking her if she ever wondered, the way I wondered, whether we had made the right choice. I said, "The number." Before you go, she stopped. I went to the kitchen counter and found Maya's note. She'd left a little handwritten message with Claire's clothes, the way Maya does, warm and practical. And I turned it over and wrote my number on the back and brought it to Claire. She looked at it for a second before she took it. "Only if you need it," I said. She folded the note once and slipped it into the pocket of her cardigan. She nodded. She opened the door. The morning light came in, April, cold and clear. She stepped out onto the porch, the same porch she had been sleeping against 6 hours earlier, and she walked down the steps without looking back. I stood in the doorway and watched her go. I told myself it was over. That this was a strange night, a one-time thing. A closed chapter reopened briefly by accident or exhaustion, and now it was closed again. I was wrong about that. My phone rang at 2:17 that afternoon. I was in my office in Charlotte, staring at the outdoor apparel campaign that was slowly becoming the bane of my professional life, when my cell buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me pick it up. Lucas. Her voice. Steadier than it had been that morning. But there was something underneath it, something tight and careful, like she was holding a very full glass and trying not to spill. "Claire," I said. "I'm not calling to this as not a personal call," she paused. "I mean it. I need help, a specific kind of help. And I want to be clear up front about what I'm asking and what I'm not asking. Because I don't want there to be any confusion about." "Claire." I leaned back in my chair. "What do you need?" A short silence. "Then I don't understand my numbers. The financial side of moving the boutique, the lease comparisons, the projection models, the break-even calculations. I've been staring at spreadsheets for 2 weeks, and I don't know if what I'm looking at is telling me to stay or go or jump off a bridge." I almost smiled. "Almost. And you want me to help you understand them?" "I want you to teach me how to understand them," she said. "There's a difference. I'm not asking you to make the decision. I'm asking you to help me learn to read the information so I can make it myself." I said, "What do I get out of it? I beg your pardon." "You heard me. What are you offering in return?" She was quiet for a moment. I could hear her thinking. "I know your apparel campaign is struggling," she said. "Maya told me. You're losing the emotional angle. You're speaking to the product when you should be speaking to the person." A beat. "I run a women's clothing boutique. I know what makes a woman decide to buy a thing she doesn't need, but suddenly can't live without. I could help." I was quiet for a moment. 3 sessions, I said. 3 sessions, she agreed, "and we need rules. Obviously. No loans. If I see a financial problem in your business, I tell you what I see. I don't fix it for you." Agreed. No family negotiations. I'm not getting involved in whatever is happening between you and your parents. "God, no," she said. "Absolutely not. And this is not a reconciliation," she said immediately. "I know. I said it last night. I meant it." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. 3 sessions, I said. "Starting this week," she said. "At the boutique. After closing, Thursday works," she said. "Lucas." "Yeah." A pause. "I know I keep saying that." "You do," I agreed. "I mean it every time. I know you do." She hung up. I set the phone down on my desk and looked at it for a moment. Then I looked at the campaign files, spread across my desk, the research documents, the focus group transcripts, the demographic breakdowns that we had been analyzing for months without getting any closer to the emotional truth of the thing. And I thought about what she had just said. You're speaking to the product when you should be speaking to the person. I thought about how she had said it, not as a critique, not as a performance, but as a simple, obvious observation. The way someone points out that you've been holding a map upside down. Not unkindly, just accurately, I picked up the campaign file. I started reading it differently. And I knew even then, sitting at my desk on a Tuesday afternoon in April, that the 3 sessions we had agreed to were going to be about a great deal more than spreadsheets and marketing copy. I just wasn't ready yet to admit how much more. I drove back to Asheville that evening. The same back roads, the same oak trees, the same yellow porch light. I unlocked my door and walked inside and stood in my kitchen for a moment, And then I opened the cabinet above the refrigerator, and I took down the lopsided ceramic bowl. I set it back on the counter where it had always been. I looked at it. Then I made dinner, and I ate alone, and I thought about Thursday, and about what it means when the person you were afraid to need comes back and asks you for the same thing you never knew how to give yourself. I didn't have an answer, but I kept the bowl on the counter, and that felt like something. Thursday came faster than Lucas expected. He spent most of Wednesday pretending he wasn't thinking about it. He sat through 2 client meetings, reviewed Noah's revised demographic research, ate lunch at his desk, and told himself 3 times that what he was walking into was purely professional. A business consultation. An exchange of expertise between 2 adults who happened to have a complicated history. Nothing more. He believed himself approximately none of those times. He arrived at the boutique on Lexington Avenue at 6:45, 15 minutes before they had agreed on. He sat in his car for 12 of those minutes. Not because he was nervous, he told himself. He wasn't nervous, but because he wanted to review the financial documents Claire had emailed him the night before. 3 pages of numbers that told a story he wasn't sure she was ready to hear. He walked in at 6:57. The boutique was quiet in the way retail spaces get after closing, that particular stillness that feels different from ordinary. Quiet, like the room itself is exhaling after a long day of being watched and touched and evaluated. A few display lights were still on. The rest had been switched off, leaving long shadows between the clothing racks. Claire was in the stockroom at the back. Lucas heard her before he saw her, the sound of something being moved, a box dragged across a concrete floor, a soft word that might have been a curse. He followed the sound and found her standing on a stool, pulling a binder from the top shelf of a metal rack crowded with inventory records and tax files, and the accumulated paperwork of 3 years of independent business ownership. She climbed down when she heard him. "You're early," she said. "You're on a step stool alone after closing," he said. That seemed like information worth noting. She handed him the binder. "Sit down, I made room at the table." The table was a folding one, the kind used for stockroom tasks, pushed against the wall and cleared of everything except a legal pad, 2 pens, and a printed copy of the same financial documents she had emailed him. She had highlighted things, 3 colors. Color-coded. Lucas looked at it and felt something shift in his chest. Not sentiment. Not quite, but recognition. That was how he would have approached it too. That was how someone approached a problem they were determined to solve on their own terms. He sat down. She sat across from him. She folded her hands on the table. "Tell me what you see," she said. Not a question, an instruction. He liked that. He opened the binder. "I see a business that's healthier than you think it is," he said, "and sicker in one specific area than you've been willing to admit." She didn't flinch. "Show me." He turned the binder toward her and pointed to the customer return rate. 62%. He let her look at it. Then he pointed to the seasonal promotion data from the previous November. "This promotion," he said. "The anniversary sale. You ran it for 10 days, correct?" 11, she said. "We always do 11. And your traffic went up 38%. "Yes, and your revenue went up 21%. She paused. "Those numbers move together. If traffic goes up, revenue. They don't always move together," he said. "And here's why they didn't for you." He turned another page. "Look at the purchase breakdown by customer category. New customers during the promotion period, customers who had never bought from you before, accounted for less than 9% of your total sales." She leaned forward. "The other 91%, he said, were customers who already loved you, who were already going to buy from you. You gave them a discount. That's it. You spent marketing money and staff hours and 11 days of promotional energy to give your most loyal customers a price reduction they didn't need in order to choose you." Claire was very still. "The promotion didn't grow your customer base," Lucas said. "It rewarded the one you already had. Which is not nothing, loyalty matters. But if you're trying to understand whether you can sustain a move to a smaller location, this number matters enormously. Because it tells you that your business is built on depth, not width. You have fewer customers than a larger boutique, but they come back more often, and they spend more per visit." He watched her process it. He had learned in his years of doing this that there was a specific moment when financial information shifted from being threatening to being useful, when the person stopped feeling like the numbers were a verdict and started feeling like they were a map. He could see that moment happening on Claire's face. "That's actually good news," she said slowly. For a smaller, more focused location? Yes. For a large storefront in Charlotte competing on volume? No. She picked up one of the pens. She wrote something on her legal pad. He couldn't read it from where he sat. Okay, she said. My turn. She reached under the table and produced a folder her own, thick with printouts. She opened it and slid it across to him without ceremony. It was a printout of his agency's campaign copy for the outdoor apparel brand. 3 proposed taglines, 2 script drafts for a video ad, and a mood board he'd emailed his team 2 weeks earlier. He looked at it. She had crossed out in red ink approximately 40% of the words. Claire, the word authentic appears 11 times across these 4 pages, she said. You know what authentic means to a woman standing in front of a display of hiking gear. He waited. Nothing, she said. It means absolutely nothing. It's the word brands use when they don't know what they actually want to say. She pointed to a tagline. And this one, premium performance for the trail and beyond. You know what that tells me about who should be wearing this jacket. Who? Someone who is already on the trail, she said. Someone who already belongs there. You know who that excludes. He was quiet. Everyone who isn't sure they're allowed to want it yet, she said. Every woman who has never owned hiking gear before and is standing in a sporting goods store feeling like the whole thing was designed for someone else. Every person who is 45 and just starting and wondering if it's too late. You're speaking to the convert. You forgot about the person standing outside the church. Lucas set down his pen. He picked up the marked-up pages. He read through her comments. They were in the margins. Careful and specific, no wasted words. She hadn't just crossed things out. She had explained why. And she was right. Not partially right. Entirely, uncomfortably, professionally right. How long did this take you? He asked. 20 minutes, she said. I know my customer. You know your customer, he said. I don't know mine. Not the way you know yours. She looked at him. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Teach me what you know, he said. That's not the deal, she said. The deal is an exchange. Session by session. They worked. For 2 more hours. It was not comfortable. Lucas was used to being the person with the most information in the room. And sitting across from Claire Monroe while she dismantled his agency's best creative work with a red pen and 20 minutes of retail instinct was not comfortable. But it was useful. More useful than the last 3 weeks of team meetings had been. At 9 o'clock, Claire put down her pen and stretched her arms above her head and said, I think that's enough for tonight. Lucas closed the binder. Next session, same time Saturday? I can do Saturday, she said. She was already gathering her papers. Efficient. Purposeful. Back in business mode, the armor back in place. He was almost at the stockroom door when she said quietly, Lucas. He turned. She was holding her legal pad against her chest. Her voice was different from her business voice, lower, less controlled. The thing you said. About my promotion. That my business is built on depth. Yes. That was the first time anyone has explained my own business to me, in a way that made me feel proud of it, instead of afraid, she said. I wanted you to know that. He nodded. Saturday, he said. Saturday, she agreed. He walked out through the quiet boutique, past the darkered display and the closed register, and he pushed out through the front door into the cool April night, and he stood on the sidewalk for a moment and breathed. He was in a significant amount of trouble. He was not referring to the campaign. Saturday arrived with a clarity that felt almost aggressive, one of those spring mornings that makes you aware of how gray the preceding months have been. Lucas drove to Lexington Avenue with 2 coffees from the place on the corner that Claire had introduced him to 3 years ago. He did not examine the significance of this decision. He told himself it was efficient, 1 stop, 2 coffees. He was wrong about it being uncomplicated from the moment he walked in. Because the boutique was open, and there were customers, and Claire was not in the stockroom. She was on the sales floor, and she was moving through a conversation with 2 women, one in her early 60s, one younger. Probably a daughter, with the particular kind of focused warmth that Lucas had never been able to replicate in a boardroom, no matter how hard he tried. She was listening to them, in a way that made them feel like the only 2 people in the building. He set the coffees on the counter, by the register, and waited. Maya, the assistant who Lucas had come to think of as the person who actually ran the boutique while Claire ran the dream of it, appeared at his elbow. She was 40-something, compact, permanently in motion, and she regarded Lucas with the expression of a woman who had heard a great deal about him and was reserving judgment until she had additional data. You brought coffee, Maya said. I brought 2 coffees, Lucas said. She takes oat milk now, Maya said. Has for about 8 months. He looked at the cup. He had ordered her the same thing she had always ordered. I didn't know that. No, Maya agreed. She picked up her clipboard and walked away. Lucas looked at the wrong coffee. Then he looked at Claire across the boutique floor, watching her talk these 2 women into no, not into anything. He watched, and he realized that was the wrong word. She wasn't talking them into anything. She was listening them into understanding what they already wanted. There was a difference. He filed it away. 20 minutes later, the 2 women left carrying shopping handbags, and Claire walked behind the register and saw the coffees and said, "You remember." He opened his mouth, he closed it, he made a decision. Actually, Maya mentioned you drink oat milk now. I got you the wrong thing. She picked up the cup. She looked at him. You could have just let me think you remembered. I could have, he said. Something shifted in her expression. Briefly. Then she set the cup down and said, "Come with me. I want to show you something before we get into the numbers." He followed her to the back section of the boutique. She stopped near a display of denim jeans, jackets, work shirts, practical things in indigo, and faded blue, and then she pointed toward a rack of silk blouses 12 feet away. "Watch," she said. He watched. A woman came in alone, early 40s, business clothes that suggested a lunch break. She went directly to the silk, touched one blouse, touched a second one, looked at the price tag, looked away, walked toward the denim, touched a pair of jeans, put them back, went back to the silk, stood very still. "What is she doing?" Lucas murmured. "Asking herself if she's allowed," Claire said quietly. "The silk is what she wants. The denim is what she thinks makes sense." She paused. "She's going to buy the denim." The woman brought a pair of dark jeans to the register. Claire stepped forward. She didn't say, "Can I help you," the way retail people are trained to say it. She said, "Those are a great choice. The wash is really versatile." Then, as she was ringing them up, "Silk, you were looking at the blue one, that's actually our most returned item." The woman looked up. "People buy it and then they're afraid to wear it," Claire said simply. "But the ones who keep it say it's the best thing they own." The woman looked back toward the silk rack. She left with both the jeans and the blouse. Lucas stood very still for a moment. "She wasn't going to buy that blouse," he said. "She wanted it," Claire said. "I just gave her permission." He looked at her. "Do you know how good you are at this?" "I know how good I am at this," she said, without any false modesty. "I just don't know how to make it into a number that matters to a bank." "That's what we're going to work on," he said. They went back to the stockroom. They worked for 3 hours. The numbers got complicated, and then, slowly, they got clearer. Lucas was in the middle of explaining break-even analysis when his phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He glanced at it. Noah. 3 missed calls. He held up a hand to Claire. 1 minute. He stepped into the hallway and called Noah back. "Lucas," Noah's voice was strained. "I need you to look at something. The campaign, I made a change this morning." "What kind of change?" "I adjusted the media buy. Shifted budget from broad reach into hyper-local targeting. It looked better on paper, and I just a pause. Whitmore approved it before I could stop him." Lucas felt the particular coldness that comes with realizing someone has moved fast in the wrong direction. "How much did he shift?" Noah told him. Lucas did the math in his head. "That leaves us with no buffer if the local conversion doesn't perform." "I know," Noah said. "I'm sorry, I thought." "It's not your fault," Lucas said. It wasn't. This was Whitmore, who made decisions with the confidence of someone who had been right enough times to stop noticing when he was wrong. "I'll handle it Monday morning." He hung up and went back into the stockroom. Claire read his face. "Problem? A colleague made a decision without full information, and it's going to cost us," he said. She nodded slowly. "That happens." "More than it should," he said. There was a silence. Then, abruptly, Claire looked at her laptop and made a face that Lucas had not seen her make before. It was the face of someone who has just realized they have done the same thing they were criticizing. "What?" he said. It wasn't a question. She turned the laptop toward him. The boutique's analytics page was open. The advertising section showed a status he didn't expect. Both campaigns were paused. "When did you pause these?" he said, keeping his voice careful. "This morning," she said. "Before you got here. I was looking at the cost per click on the broad campaign, and it seemed I thought I could save money by cutting both while I figured out the local strategy." He looked at the traffic data. It was already down. Not catastrophically, but measurably. in the few hours since she'd switched them off. How long does it usually take for people to assume a boutique is closing when their social ads disappear? He asked. Claire went very still. You know about that. Retail depends on presence, he said. Digital presence especially, now. If you've been in someone's feed for 18 months, and you suddenly vanish. Her phone rang. She looked at it. It's Maya, she answered. Lucas watched her face change as she listened. He could hear Maya's voice tight, fast from where he sat. After about 30 seconds, Claire said, Okay. Don't say anything to anyone. I'll call you back in 10 minutes. She hung up. Someone posted in the Asheville Retail Community Group, she said. Her voice was flat. The post says the boutique is quietly closing. It has 47 comments. Lucas said nothing. Claire stood up. She walked 2 steps toward the wall. She turned around. She walked back. She sat down. I made an impulse decision without running it by you first, she said, because I wanted to prove I could manage one thing myself. I know, he said. And now there's a rumor circulating that I'm closing. And you want to say I told you so. I absolutely do not want to say that, he said. Which was true. What he wanted was to fix it, and he was making himself not say that either, because she hadn't asked him to fix it. She had asked him to help her understand things, so she could fix them herself. He waited. Claire picked up her pen. She set it down. She picked it up again. What would you do? She asked. Not fix it for me. Not tell me what to do. What would you do? She was asking him to think beside her, not instead of her. I would reactivate the local campaign immediately, he said. And I would put one post in that community group. Not a promotion. Not a sale. Just a statement. What kind of statement? The truth, he said. That you're evaluating your next chapter and the store is absolutely open while you decide. She stared at the table. No fake urgency, he added. No invented discount, just the truth. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she opened her laptop and started typing. He watched her write the post. It was 4 sentences. It was honest. It was exactly right. She hit publish. They both watched the community group for 2 minutes. Then 5. Then the first response came in. Someone who said they'd be in tomorrow. Then another. Then a woman who wrote, I literally just walked by and saw your lights on and was about to come. Ask glad you're staying. Claire exhaled. Lucas exhaled. They looked at each other across the table and neither of them laughed. But it was close. I should have told you I was thinking about pausing the ads, she said. And I should have checked in about your advertising status before I arrived today, he said. Instead of assuming everything was running the same way it was Thursday. She blinked. That's you're taking partial responsibility for this. You made the decision, he said. But I'm your consultant this month, and I didn't ask the right questions. That's on me. Something in her face changed in a way he didn't have a name for. My ex-husband never said anything like that, she said. Then she caught herself. I don't mean I'm not comparing you. I just mean that men in my life don't usually. She stopped. Never mind. You were married? He hadn't known. Or maybe he had known and forgotten. Or maybe it was the kind of thing she had never told him. For about 18 months, she said. A long time ago. Before the boutique. She picked up her coffee, the wrong coffee. The one he'd bought before Maya's correction. She had been drinking it this whole time. He was very good at telling me what I'd done wrong. Not as good at looking at himself. Lucas said nothing. You're different from that, she said quietly. It didn't sound like a compliment exactly. It sounded like something she was working out in real time. I've made plenty of mistakes, he said. I'm fairly practiced at managing them away instead of facing them. She looked at him. Is that what you did with us? The question sat in the air between them, like something breakable. He didn't look away from her. Yes, he said. I think that's exactly what I did. After a moment, Claire closed her laptop. She pushed back from the table. She stood and walked out of the stockroom, and Lucas thought for a second that he had said the wrong thing, gone too far, crossed one of the lines they'd drawn. But she stopped at the entrance to the main floor and said, without turning around, Come out here. I want to walk you through the store. No laptop, no phone. He set his phone face down on the table. He followed her. What happened in the next hour was something Lucas Bennett would think about for a long time afterward. Not because it was dramatic, it wasn't. Nothing exploded. Nothing broke. Nobody said anything that couldn't be taken back. What happened was quieter than that, and in some ways more significant. She showed him the boutique the way she saw it. Not the data version. Not the square footage and SKU count version. She walked him past the denim wall and explained that shorter women always gravitated to the third rack from the left, because the mirror at that end added 2 inches, and she had put it there deliberately. She showed him the fitting room hallway and told him that they had moved the shipping boxes, which had been stacked there for 8 months, 3 weeks ago, and that older shoppers immediately stopped avoiding that section. She showed him the table near the front window where she'd started staging appointments, and she told him the appointment revenue had gone from 0 to 15% of her monthly income in 4 months. "None of this is in the spreadsheet," he said. "I know," she said. "I didn't know how to put it in." "You're going to need to learn," he said. "Because when you go to a new landlord with a proposal for the smaller space, these are the arguments that will make them say yes. A boutique that understands its customer this precisely is not a risk. It's an asset." She stopped walking. She turned to face him. "You really believe the smaller location can work?" she said. "I think you can make it work," he said. "I think you are the variable that makes it work or not. Not the square footage, not the neighborhood. You." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why did you put the bowl back?" she said. He hadn't expected that. "What?" "The ceramic bowl. On the kitchen counter. I noticed it was gone Thursday morning. But when I drove by your house Saturday afternoon," she stopped. "I wasn't driving by. I was driving past on the way to my parents' place, and your street is on the way. I saw it through your kitchen window." He was quiet for a moment. "Because it belonged there," he said. She nodded slowly, like that answer confirmed something she had been uncertain about. Then she looked away from him, toward the front window. "After I left," she said, "I kept thinking you'd call. Not to ask me to come back, I know that's not who you are. Just to say that you were hurt, that it mattered." She paused. "You never called," he said. "Why not?" He had asked himself this question many times. He had an answer that was honest and another that was easier. And he had learned, somewhere in the last 8 months, that the distance between those 2 answers was exactly the size of the mistake he had made. "Because I was terrified," he said. "And I have spent my whole life converting terror into action items. There were no action items for what I was feeling. So I didn't call." She was quiet for a long time. "I left before I asked you what your silence meant," she said. "I decided it meant you didn't care. I didn't ask. I just decided." "You were wrong," he said, "and I understand why you thought what you thought." They stood near the front window of the closed boutique, not touching, not moving. The space between them filled with things that had been said and things that were still waiting. Then Claire said, in a voice that was lower than her usual voice, steadier than he expected, "Can you stay for 1 more hour? Not as a consultant. Just can you sit with me for an hour? No numbers. No campaigns." Lucas looked at her. He thought about the answer, and whether it was wise and whether it violated the conditions they had set, and then he stopped thinking about all of that. "Yes," he said. They sat near the fitting rooms on the 2 small chairs. Claire kept there for customers who were waiting. They didn't talk much. What they talked about was a customer she'd had that week who had cried in the fitting room and then bought nothing, and how Claire had given her a glass of water and sat with her for 20 minutes, a mistake Noah had made on a data summary that Lucas had corrected quietly, without making it into a lesson. Small things. The kind of things you say to someone when you're not performing. At 10 o'clock, Claire stood and said she needed to lock up. Lucas stood. He was almost at the door when she said very quietly, "Lucas." "Yeah. Sitting still is the hardest thing I've asked you to do in a long time, isn't it?" He considered the question seriously. "Yes," he said. "It is," she smiled. Not the bright, presentable smile she wore in the boutique. The real one, the one that went sideways. "You did okay," she said. He walked out into the night. He sat in his car for a moment before starting it. He pulled out his phone and opened Noah's number and texted, "Monday meeting. We're rebuilding the campaign brief from scratch. Bring everything you have on the customer's first purchase moment. Who they are, right before they buy something they've never bought before." Noah replied in 40 seconds, "Already have notes on this. See you Monday." Lucas set the phone down. He drove home. He did not check his email that night. He ate dinner without looking at his laptop. He went to bed at a reasonable hour. He did not sleep particularly well. But it was a different kind of restlessness from the kind he was used to. Not the restlessness of a problem unsolved. Something closer to the restlessness of a person who has finally, after a very long time, started telling the truth. The lease deadline was Friday. That was the fact that sat at the center of everything like a stone, dropped into still water, sending ripples through every conversation, every phone call, every moment of quiet that Lucas and Claire tried to carve out in the days between Saturday night and the end of the week. 5 days, 120 hours. And in that time, everything that had been moving slowly between them began moving fast, not because they pushed it, but because the world around Claire stopped giving her the luxury of waiting. It started Monday morning, before Lucas even got to the office. His phone rang at 7:42 while he was still in the car. The number was one he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. He answered. Mr. Bennett. The voice was male, measured, the kind of voice that practiced sounding reasonable. This is Richard Monroe, Claire's father. Lucas pulled into a parking space but did not turn off the engine. Mr. Monroe. I'll be direct, Richard said. I know you've been spending time with my daughter. I know she's asked for your help with her business decisions. Claire asked me to consult on some financial questions. Yes. I'm asking you professionally and personally to step back from that role. A pause. Claire is at a crossroads that requires family guidance, not the input of someone who has a personal interest in her choices. Lucas kept his voice even. Mr. Monroe, with respect, Claire is the one who asked me to help. That's her decision to make. She is my daughter. She is a 38-year-old woman who built a business from nothing, Lucas said. And she asked for help understanding her own numbers. That is all I'm providing. The silence on the other end lasted 4 seconds. You don't know what's at stake here. Then maybe Claire should be the one to tell me, Lucas said. Not you. He ended the call. He sat in the parking lot for a moment, hands on the wheel, working through what had just happened. Richard Monroe had called him, had found his number from where he didn't know, and had called him before 8 in the morning to tell him to back away from his own daughter's business decisions. Not because he thought Lucas was giving bad advice. Because Lucas represented something Richard couldn't control. He went inside and told no one what had happened. Not yet. He texted Claire instead. Your father called me this morning. I didn't agree to anything. Wanted you to know before you heard it from him. 3 minutes passed. Then I am so sorry. I had no idea he would do that. Then 30 seconds later, are you okay? He stared at that last message for a moment. She was asking if he was okay. Not defending her father. Not minimizing it, not explaining it away. Just, are you okay? I'm fine, he typed back. Focus on your day. We'll talk Thursday. Thursday was their third and final session. Monday was brutal for Lucas in a different way. The apparel campaign meeting was at 10. And Whitmore, his senior partner, the man who had shifted the media budget without full consultation, was in the room with the kind of energy that fills space before a confrontation. Lucas had spent Sunday restructuring the campaign brief based on everything Claire had shown him and based on conversations with Noah that had produced something genuinely different from what they'd started with. He stood at the head of the conference table, and he did something he had not done in 15 years of agency work. He started by naming the people who had made the work possible. The shift in this campaign comes from 2 sources, he said. Noah Parker's research into first purchase psychology, which he produced in 3 days with almost no direction from me, and insight provided by an independent retail consultant named Claire Monroe, who runs a women's boutique in Asheville and understands the emotional moment before a purchase better than anyone I've worked with. The room was quiet. Whitmore said, "We have a retail consultant now." "We have access to one," Lucas said. "She's being paid as an independent contractor. Invoice is already processed." He had made sure of that. Claire was not going to be someone's unpaid inspiration. Not on his watch. Her contribution is foundational to the new brief, and I want that on record. Noah, sitting 2 seats down, looked at his laptop screen, as though he was suddenly finding it very interesting. But Lucas could see the line of his shoulders change. The particular way a person's body reacts when they have been seen accurately for the first time in a professional setting. Whitmore looked at the new brief. He looked at it for a long time. "This is different from what we had," he said. "Yes," Lucas said. "Riskier." "It's honest," Lucas said. "Which means if it lands completely. And if it doesn't, at least we haven't spent another quarter telling people a jacket is authentic." Whitmore made a sound that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite objection. But he didn't push back. Lucas had learned, over years of working with him, that Whitmore's resistance usually collapsed when the alternative was admitting he didn't have a better idea. The meeting ended with the new brief approved. Lucas texted Noah afterward, "Good work. This week and last." Noah replied, You didn't have to say my name in there. I know, Lucas wrote back. That's why I did. Tuesday, Claire called him at noon. She wasn't calling to update him on the store or to prepare for Thursday. She called because her mother had visited the boutique that morning. She came in while we had customers, Claire said. Her voice had the compressed quality of someone speaking carefully to avoid saying something they can't take back. She stood by the register and waited until there was a gap, and then she said in front of Maya that she had made an appointment with a commercial real estate agent in Charlotte, and she wanted me to come with her this weekend. Lucas said nothing. He let her keep going. And when I said I wasn't going to Charlotte this weekend, she said. Claire stopped. He heard her breathe. She said that I was being childish, that I was throwing away my father's support and her connections out of stubbornness. And then she said, another pause, longer. She said that the reason I couldn't make the boutique work was because I'd always relied on the wrong people. The last 4 words landed with a weight that Lucas understood was not accidental. She meant you, Lucas said. I don't know who she meant, Claire said. But it felt like she was saying that I was weak for asking for help. And then also saying I was weak for not asking for her help. She stopped. I can't win by either of their definitions. Because their definitions aren't about you winning, Lucas said. They're about them not losing. Silence. Say that again, Claire said. Your parents aren't fighting about what's best for your business, he said. They're fighting about each other. And you've been the battlefield. Another long silence. He heard something shift in her breathing. I know that, she said finally. I've known that for months. But I didn't know how to say it out loud. You just did, he said. Lucas, her voice dropped. How are you so calm about things? He almost said, because I'm not calm, I just perform calm very well. Instead, he said, I'll see you Thursday. And Claire, whatever happens with your parents before then, remember that the decision about your store doesn't belong to them. It never did. She was quiet for a moment. Then okay. Thursday 7 p.m. the boutique after closing. Lucas arrived exactly on time. Claire was already in the stockroom. Maya was closing up the register in the front, and she gave Lucas a look as he passed through, not unfriendly, but assessing the way someone looks at weather before deciding whether to bring an umbrella. She had a hard day, Maya said quietly. Not as a warning. As information, I know, Lucas said. He found Claire standing at the table with 3 folders spread open in front of her. She had clearly been there for a while. Her hair was up in the practical way she wore it when she was working hard and didn't want to be bothered by anything. She had a pen behind each ear. When she looked up at him, her eyes were tired but focused. Sit down, she said. I've been doing homework, he sat. She had in fact done extraordinary homework. In the 5 days since their last session, she had called 2 potential new landlords, gotten preliminary quotes on 2 smaller storefronts, one on a side street in Asheville, one closer to the River Arts District, and built her own rough version of the comparison model Lucas had taught her. It was imperfect in places. She had made some assumptions he would have weighted differently. But the structure was right. The thinking was right. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. Tell me what I got wrong, she said. You underestimated your appointment revenue growth rate, he said, by about 20%. Given what you told me about how that service has been expanding, I think you were being conservative to the point of distorting the picture. She picked up a pen. Show me. He showed her. She adjusted the number. The model shifted. The side street location, which had looked marginal in her version, suddenly showed a viable path to profitability within 14 months. She stared at the updated number. 14 months, she said. With your current loyal customer base, your appointment model, and a tighter inventory strategy. Yes, he said. It's not guaranteed. She was quiet. He let her be quiet. He had learned slowly, imperfectly, that Claire's silence wasn't withdrawal. It was processing. She was a person who needed to turn something over a few times before she trusted it. Then she did something that surprised him. She closed all 3 folders. She pushed them to the side of the table. She looked at him directly and said, I told my parents I wanted to meet with them Friday morning. Alone. Before I sign anything or agree to anything, she paused. I didn't ask for your opinion on that. I'm telling you because I want you to know. Okay, he said. And I don't want you there, she said. Not because I don't trust you, but because if you're in the room, my father will talk to you, and my mother will watch you, and I'll become the 3rd person in a conversation about my own life. She said it clearly, without apology, without softness. I need to do this part by myself. Lucas felt something not heard exactly. More like the specific sensation of wanting to protect someone and recognizing that the protection itself would cause harm. He nodded. I understand, do you? She wasn't being sharp. She was actually asking. I understand that showing up uninvited would make your act of independence into another problem. Someone else managed, he said. Yes, I get it. Something in her face relaxed by a degree. I need to ask you something, she said. Ask. The 3 plans you mentioned at our first session, the conservative one, the aggressive one, the balanced one. She put her hand flat on the closed folders. I want to see them. All tonight. With real numbers. He had prepared them. He had known she would ask. He opened his laptop and turned it toward her. The conservative plan was cheap and safe, and would make the boutique functionally invisible. Minimal marketing, minimal staff hours, a storefront in a low-traffic location. Survivable, possibly. But it would require Claire to shrink herself to fit inside it. The aggressive plan looked exciting on paper. Bigger location, full staff, ambitious marketing spend. It could work spectacularly. It could also collapse in a single bad quarter with no buffer to survive it. The balance plan was the third one. Side street location. Reduced but protected staff hours. Appointment model as a revenue anchor. Marketing focused on the existing customer base rather than broad acquisition. 14 months to profitability. Room to breathe. Room to grow without gambling. He explained each one without recommending any of them. He said the risks out loud. He said the opportunities out loud. He answered every question she asked, and she asked good questions. The kind of questions someone asks when they've stopped being afraid of the information and started using it. At the end, he closed the laptop. Which one, she said. I'm not choosing, he said. Lucas Claire. He kept his voice steady. I am not choosing for you. Not because I don't have an opinion, but because this decision belongs to you, and whichever choice you make needs to feel like yours when you're standing in front of your parents Friday morning. If I pick it, it's not yours. She looked at him for a long moment. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were very clear. Then she looked at the closed laptop. Then back at him. The balance plan, she said. Tell me why. Because the conservative one asks me to disappear, she said. And the aggressive one asks me to bet everything on a single quarter. And I've watched my father do that his whole life, and I've watched it cost him. She stopped. The balanced one is the only one that assumes I know what I'm doing and gives me time to prove it. He said, Are you certain? She said no. She said it without hesitation, without embarrassment. I'm choosing it anyway. The words hit him somewhere he hadn't expected. He had spent 15 years in boardrooms with people who performed certainty, who delivered decisions like they had never doubted, who treated hesitation as weakness. And here was Claire Monroe saying, I'm not certain, I'm choosing anyway. And it was the most professionally mature thing he had heard in longer than he could remember. That's the right answer, he said. To which question? To all of them, he said. She exhaled. She pressed her palms flat on the table. Then, she stood up and walked out of the stockroom. And this time Lucas knew she wasn't retreating. She walked to the front of the boutique, and he followed her, and she stood at the window and looked out at the street. She came in here Monday, Claire said without turning around. My mother. And she stood in my store, and she told me in front of my employee, in front of customers, that I had always relied on the wrong people. She paused. She meant you. I know she meant you. I figured, Lucas said. She's wrong, Claire said. She said it simply, like she was stating a fact about inventory. You have never once told me what to do. You've shown me information and waited for me to decide. You've disagreed with me when you thought I was wrong, and you told me why, and then you let me decide anyway. That is not turned around. That is not what the wrong people do. He was standing about 6 feet from her. He didn't close the distance. He didn't move. He had learned, was still learning, that the impulse to move toward her in moments like this was not always the right impulse. Sometimes the right thing was to stay where he was and let what she'd just said exist in the space between them without him reaching for it. Can I ask you something, he said. Yes. The morning you woke up on my porch. When I asked guest room or couch, he paused. Why my porch, honestly? You could have called Maya. You could have gotten a hotel room. You had options. She looked at him for a long time. Because you were the only person I could think of who would not immediately try to solve me, she said. My mother would have had a plan by the time I finished explaining. My father would have turned it into a lesson, my friends. She paused. They're kind. But kindness isn't always what you need at midnight when you've been carrying everyone else's expectations all day. She looked at him steadily. You gave me a guest room and a glass of water, and you silenced my phone. That was exactly right. She stopped. That was what I needed. You needed someone to let you exist for a night, without requiring anything from you, he said. Yes, Claire. He said her name carefully. I need to tell you something. Not as your consultant, something else. She waited. The night you left, he said. I stood in the doorway while you packed, and I knew what I needed to say, and I said something about the internet bill instead. I have thought about that night. He stopped. He started again. I have thought about that night, more times than I want to admit. Not because I think I can change it. Because I need you to know that my silence was not indifference. I was terrified. I was so terrified of saying the wrong thing that I said the practical thing, which turned out to be the worst possible thing. She was very still, and the reason I didn't call afterward, he said, wasn't because I moved on. It was because I didn't know how to call you and say. I converted every feeling I had about losing you into a spreadsheet, and now the spreadsheet is done. And I don't know what to do with what's left. The silence between them lasted a long time. I left without asking what your silence meant, she said. Her voice was quiet. I decided it meant you didn't care. I decided that without asking, and she paused. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I made silence the only thing available, he said. Another silence. Different from the earlier ones. She said, we were both terrible at this. We were, he agreed. I don't want to be terrible at it again, she said. He looked at her. Neither do I. She looked down at her hands. Then back up. The third session ends tonight, she said. Those were the terms. Yes, said. So whatever comes next, she seemed to be choosing her words with precision. Whatever comes next isn't a session. No, he said. It's not. She nodded slowly. The muscle at the corner of her jaw moved. I need to get through Friday first, she said. The meeting with my parents. I need to do that, and I need to do it alone, and I need to know what I'm choosing before I stop. Before anything else I know, he said. I'm not pushing you away, she said quickly. I want to be clear about that. I know I've done that before. And this isn't, Claire, he said it gently, I know. She exhaled. Okay. He moved toward the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and turned back once. One thing, he said. After Friday, when your parents have gone, will you call me? Not to report what happened. Just he paused, looking for the right word. Just so I know you're okay. She looked at him for a moment that stretched. Yes, she said, I'll call you. He nodded. He walked out. He drove 2 blocks and pulled over and sat with the engine running for a long time. Not because he was upset. Not because he was sad. But because something had shifted in the last hour in a way that was too significant to drive through without acknowledging. He had told her the truth. Not the organized version of the truth. Not the truth converted into bullet points and practical implications. The actual truth. The one that had been sitting in the back of his chest for 8 months like a piece of furniture he kept walking around in the dark. And she had told him hers. And neither of them had flinched. He pulled out his phone. He almost texted her something. He put the phone back in his pocket. Some things didn't need to be followed up. Some things just needed to be said and then allowed to be real. He drove home. Friday morning arrived, and he was at the coffee shop across the street. From the boutique at 8:52, 8 minutes before Claire had told him the meeting with her parents was scheduled. He was not there because he had decided to be there. He was there because his body had apparently made the decision before his mind got involved. He ordered coffee. He sat at a table by the window. He told himself he was working. He opened his laptop. He did not look at the boutique across the street. He looked at the boutique across the street. He could see the front window. The lights were on inside. He couldn't see anyone. The shades were half drawn the way Claire pulled them when she wanted privacy. At 9:14 his phone buzzed. Noah. Whitmore wants to push back the campaign launch 2 weeks. Lucas typed back. Tell him the launch stays. We'll talk Monday. He put the phone down. At 9:27 he saw movement in the boutique. A shape through the shaded glass. He couldn't tell who. At 9:31 the front door opened. Richard Monroe came out first. He was a tall man. Silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who had always expected a certain amount of deference from the world. He was carrying an unsigned document. Lucas could see the papers in his hand, recognizable even from across the street. The unsigned lease. He held it at his side and he stood on the sidewalk and he did not look back at the door. Evelyn Monroe came out 30 seconds later. Smaller than her husband, equally composed. But there was something in the way she stood. She stopped on the porch step and turned back toward the door. Her hand reached out, and Lucas saw her touch something. Or someone. Then she stepped down. She walked to a car parked at the curb. Richard walked in a different direction. They did not leave together. The boutique door stayed closed. Lucas watched it. He did not cross the street. Every instinct he had trained over 40 years of solving problems with action was telling him to cross the street, knock on the door, and ask if she was okay. He sat on his hands metaphorically, and he did not move. He sat with his cold coffee and the weight of knowing that the most important thing he could do in this moment was nothing. 23 minutes after her parents left, the boutique door opened. Claire stood in the doorway for a moment. She looked across the street. Their eyes met through the window glass. She did not wave. She did not smile. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read across that distance. Something tired, something clear, something that might have been relief. Then she locked the boutique door behind her. She crossed the street. She walked into the coffee shop and she sat down across from him without saying anything for a moment. She looked at his cold coffee and then at his laptop, which had the same document open on it that had been there when she arrived. "You haven't been working," she said. "No," he admitted. She nodded. "I chose the smaller location," she said. "I told them this morning. The Lexington lease is not being renewed. I have a meeting with the landlord on Merrimon next week." "How did they take it?" "My father left with the unsigned lease," she said. "He didn't say anything." She paused. "My mother touched my arm on the way out." He waited. "She didn't apologize," Claire said. "She didn't say she was proud of me. She just touched my arm, and then she left." She looked down at the table. "I think that might be the closest she knows how to get right now. It might be enough to build from," Lucas said carefully. Maybe she looked up. "I was terrified the whole time. The whole 23 minutes. She said it directly, without flinching. I kept waiting for one of them to say something that would make me doubt myself. And they did say things, and I doubted myself. And then I said what I had decided to say anyway." She paused. "That's new for me, I know," he said. She looked at him with the direct, assessing look that he had come to understand was not judgment but honesty. "You were going to cross the street," she said. "Weren't you?" "Yes," he said. He didn't see the point in lying about it. "What stopped you?" "You asked me to wait," he said. "So I waited." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Do you still want me when I'm not falling apart on your porch?" The question came out quietly, but it was not a small question. It was the question that had been building since Tuesday night in April, when he crouched down on his front porch and said her name. It was the question underneath every session, every crossed-out advertising tagline, every moment of sitting still, when his instinct told him to fix something. He didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. "But I want to be honest with you about what that means. Because I don't want to be the safe house you come to when everything else is burning. I want—" He stopped. He made himself say it plainly. "I want ordinary Tuesdays. Boring arguments about scheduling. The kind of conversations that don't have a resolution, because they're just about being real with each other. I want a relationship where neither of us disappears into work when it gets difficult." She was listening with her whole body. "I'm telling you that, because the last time, I didn't say what I needed," he said. "And it cost us 8 months. I'm not doing that again." She was quiet for a moment. "I want the same things," she said. "I just need us to go slowly enough that I actually believe them." "Slowly is fine," he said. "New rules," she said, "not business rules." "Tell me." "We say when we're afraid," she said. "We don't solve each other without being asked. We don't use work as a place to hide." She paused. "And we protect one evening a week, just for us. No campaigns, no lease negotiations, no family crises." "Tuesday evenings," he said immediately. She blinked. Then she almost smiled. "Why Tuesday?" "Because that's when you woke up on my porch," he said. "And I want us to own that night back." The almost smile became a real one. The sideways real one. The one he had missed for 8 months without letting himself admit it. She reached across the table, not to take his hand. She pressed her fingers against the back of his hand, lightly, for exactly 3 seconds. Then she pulled them back. "Tuesday evenings," she agreed. He asked before he leaned across the table. He said, "Can I?" and she said yes before he finished the question. The kiss was quiet and brief and imperfect. It did not erase anything. It did not perform anything. It was simply the physical fact of a decision. Two people had just made, after a very long time of making every other decision first. When they pulled back, Claire looked at him with clear eyes. "The creak in your porch chair," she said. "Don't fix it." He looked at her, confused. "Things that tell the truth immediately are worth keeping," she said. He understood what she meant. He understood completely. He flagged down the server and ordered 2 fresh coffees. And outside the window, the spring morning continued, without asking anything from either of them. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like exactly enough. The 6 weeks that followed were not a love story in the way movies tell it. There was no single moment where everything clicked into place, and the music swelled, and two people looked at each other across a sun-drenched afternoon, and understood that the hard part was over. The hard part was not over. In some ways, the hard part was just beginning, because the hard part of rebuilding something is not the dramatic decision. It is the Tuesday morning 3 weeks later when the delivery is late, and the new landlord is calling about a plumbing issue, and you are standing in a half-unpacked storefront, wondering if you made the right call, and you have to make 50 small decisions before noon, and none of them feel as clean as the one big coffee shop with someone you love sitting across from you. That was the reality of it. And Lucas and Claire were both by now committed to reality. The move happened in the second week of May. Claire had signed the lease on the Merrimon Avenue location on a Monday morning, alone, the way she had decided she needed to do it. She texted Lucas afterward. "Done, it's mine." He had been in a client meeting when the text came in. He looked at it under the table and felt something in his chest ease that he hadn't fully realized was tight. He texted back, "Tuesday dinner is on me." She replied, "You're going to make pasta again, aren't you?" "It's the only thing I make well." "That's not true. You make good coffee. I made you the wrong coffee once. And you told me immediately, instead of letting me think you were thoughtful," she wrote. "That's better than the coffee." He smiled at his phone under the table, like a man who had temporarily forgotten he was in a professional setting. Across the table, Noah caught his eye and looked away with the careful diplomacy of someone who has learned when not to ask questions. The physical move took 4 days. Claire had hired 2 movers, kept Maya on full hours through the transition, and made decisions about what to bring and what to let go with a precision that surprised even herself. 40% of the inventory did not make it to the new location. Not because she was forced to leave it behind, but because she stood in the old stockroom one afternoon and asked herself, honestly, whether each piece was something she believed in or something she had been keeping out of inertia. She called Lucas on the second day of the move, mid-afternoon. "I'm standing in the stockroom," she said, "and I'm holding a rack of dresses that I ordered 2 years ago because my mother said they were what Charlotte women were buying. I have sold 11 of them in 24 months. How many do you have?" 43. "How do you feel about them?" A pause. "Like I bought them to prove something to someone who wasn't going to be impressed anyway." "Then you know what to do with them," he said. She donated all 43 to a women's resource center the following morning. Maya helped her load the boxes. When they were done, Maya stood at the back of the van and said, "I feel like we should say something ceremonial." 43 bad decisions, Claire said, given to people who will actually love them. Maya nodded. "That works." The new location was smaller. That was simply the fact of it. And Claire had decided she was not going to pretend otherwise or dress it up in language about being curated and intentional the way brands do when they want to make necessity sound like philosophy. She told her customers the truth. She was in a smaller space. She was carrying less inventory. And she was putting more of her energy into personal appointments because that was where she did her best work. The response surprised her. Not all of it was positive. 3 longtime customers emailed to express disappointment. One woman who had been shopping with Claire for 2 years said the new location felt like a step backward and she hoped things weren't as bad as they looked. Claire read that email twice, felt the sting of it, and wrote back, "I understand why it might look that way. I hope you'll give us a chance to show you what we're building." But the majority of responses were different. The appointment bookings, which had been growing steadily, jumped 30% in the first 2 weeks after the move. Women who had come in before for the occasional purchase started coming in for the intentional experience. They called ahead. They came with specific needs. They left having spent more per visit and feeling better about every purchase because they'd had room to think instead of being overwhelmed by options. Maya updated the analytics every Friday morning and slid the printout onto Claire's desk without comment. The numbers were doing what the balanced plan had said they would do. Slowly, imperfectly, but unmistakably in the right direction. Lucas saw the Friday report on the third week because Claire photographed it and sent it to him without explanation. Just the image. He looked at it for a moment, and then he texted back, "You were right," she replied. "You gave me the model. You built the business," he said. "The model is just arithmetic." 3 dots and disappeared twice before she finally wrote, "Come over Tuesday. I'll make dinner this time." He showed up Tuesday with wine and without his laptop. This was a new habit he had been deliberately building, the practice of walking through Claire's door without something to open, something to check, something that could redirect his attention when the conversation got uncomfortable. He had discovered that the discomfort of sitting with another person and being fully present was something he had been avoiding, professionally and personally, for the better part of his adult life. He was not yet good at it, but he was getting better. Claire made chicken and rice in the way her grandmother had taught her, with lemon and garlic, and a patience that required leaving it alone in the oven for longer than Lucas's instinct told him was necessary. "It's been 40 minutes, he said. "I know. Shouldn't we check?" "Lucas." She looked at him from across the kitchen counter. Some things don't improve from being checked on constantly. He understood she was not entirely talking about the chicken. He sat down and poured the wine. They ate and they talked about small things, the way they had agreed to do on Tuesdays. Noah's first solo presentation, which had apparently gone well enough that the client had asked specifically for him on the follow-up meeting. A customer who had come into the boutique that week and tried on 12 blouses and bought none of them, and then called the next morning to say she'd been thinking about the third one and could Claire hold it. A creak in the floor of the new location that both Maya and Claire had decided was charming rather than structural. After dinner, Lucas was washing the dishes. They had agreed on this division without discussing it, the way comfortable people agree on things, when Claire said, from the table where she was finishing her wine, "My father came by the store today." Lucas turned off the water. He turned around. "He didn't call ahead," she said. "He just showed up. About 3 in the afternoon." She was looking at her wine glass, not at him. He stood inside the door for a minute and he looked around. And then he walked to the center of the room, where I'd set up the appointment area, and he stood there for a while. Lucas waited. He didn't say anything for a long time, she said. And then he asked Maya which mirror was her favorite, and Maya told him the one by the window, and he went and stood in front of it, like he was checking something. She paused. And then he picked up a scarf from the display rack. The cashmere one, the dark blue one, that costs $340. Lucas was very still. He read the tag, Claire said. Both sides. Like he was studying it. And then he brought it to the register and he paid full price. And he asked Maya to wrap it nicely because it was for his wife. Her voice was steady, but just barely. And then he left. He didn't talk to me. He didn't come to the back. He just bought the scarf and left. A silence. "Did you see him?" Lucas asked. "I was in the back with an appointment," she said. Maya told me looked up. "He paid full price, Lucas. My father, who has negotiated every transaction of his life, who has never paid full retail price for anything he could avoid, paid full price for a scarf in my store. He was telling you something," Lucas said. "I know," she said. "I just don't know if I should let it be enough." He dried his hands on the dish towel. He came and sat across from her at the table. "You don't have to decide that tonight," he said. "I know," she looked at him. "I'm just telling you." "I know you are," he said. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. Not the brief 3-second touch from the coffee shop. She left it there, warm and certain. "Thank you for not telling me what to feel about it," she said. "You're an adult," he said. "You get to feel whatever you feel." She squeezed his hand once, and then let go and picked up her wine. "Tell me something about your week. That isn't about the campaign," she said. He thought about it. "I went to bed before midnight every night this week." She stared at him. "Every night?" "Every night, Lucas." She said his name like it was a full sentence. "That's remarkable, I know. I slept badly at first, but by Thursday I woke up, and it was 6:30, and I'd had 8 hours, and I didn't know what to do with myself." "What did you do?" "I made coffee," he said, "and I sat on the porch for 20 minutes and just sat there, on the creaky chair." "On the creaky chair," he confirmed. She smiled. "The real one." The campaign launched the following Monday, And it performed the way the new brief had promised, not explosively, not with the kind of immediate numbers that make boardrooms erupt, but steadily and authentically. The demographic data in the first 2 weeks showed something that Lucas had not quite seen in 15 years of marketing work. Engagement from people who had never bought outdoor apparel before. New customers, the exact demographic that Claire had identified when she said he was speaking to the convert and forgetting the person standing outside the church. Whitmore called Lucas on Wednesday morning. "The first-time buyer numbers," he said, without preamble. "I see them," Lucas said. "How did you get there?" Whitmore asked. "What changed in the brief?" Lucas considered his answer. "I stopped assuming the customer already knew they belonged in the product," he said. "I started asking who they were the moment before they decided they were allowed to want it." A pause on Whitmore's end. "That's from the retail consultant." "It's from Claire Monroe." "Yes," Lucas said. "She's on the invoice." "I know she's on the invoice," Whitmore said. "I'm not complaining about the invoice. I'm asking, can she do this again? For the spring campaign." Lucas was quiet for a moment. He thought about the deal he and Claire had made. 3 sessions. An exchange. Not a recurring arrangement. Not a professional relationship that bled into everything else. He thought about Tuesday evenings, and the chicken left alone in the oven, and the way she had looked at him when he said he'd gone to bed before midnight every night. "I'll ask her," he said. "But it's her decision." He told Claire that evening over the phone. Not as a pitch, not as an opportunity. "Just here is what Whitmore asked. Here is what I said. Here is you deciding." She was quiet for a moment. "He wants to pay me for a consulting arrangement." "Yes, not a favor, not informal, a contract," he said. "With a rate, I think you should negotiate up from whatever he offers first." She laughed. "You're telling me how to negotiate my contract?" "I'm telling you that you are worth more than whatever number he puts on the table first. What you do with that information is your business." Another pause. "I'll think about it," she said. "And Lucas, this doesn't change Tuesday, right?" "Tuesday is still Tuesday. Tuesday is sacred," he said. "I'll defend it in writing if you want." "I want," she said. She took the contract. She negotiated up from Whitmore's first offer by 22%. She called Lucas afterward to tell him, and he said, "You left another 8% on the table, but that's a conversation for another time." And she said, "I am going to pretend I didn't hear that." And he said, "That's fair." 3 weeks in, something unexpected happened at the boutique. A woman came in on a Saturday mid-60s, composed, wearing a coat that suggested she took clothing seriously. She looked around the new space with the assessment of someone who had been in many stores and had strong opinions about all of them. Maya greeted her. The woman asked to speak with the owner. Claire came out from the back. The woman introduced herself as Patricia Weil. She had driven from Hendersonville, 40 minutes south, because a friend had told her about the appointment experience at the boutique. "I had a mastectomy 14 months ago," Patricia said plainly. "The way people state facts they have made peace with. I've been having difficulty finding things that fit the way I want them to. Most stores the salespeople mean well, but they don't quite." She paused. "They don't know what to do with the conversation," Claire said. Patricia looked at her. "Exactly." Claire brought her to the appointment area. She spent 90 minutes with her. She didn't pretend the fitting process was straightforward, and she didn't rush past the moments that required stillness. At the end of the appointment, Patricia bought 4 items and made a follow-up appointment for 3 weeks later. Before she left, she stopped at the door and turned back to Claire. "Your friend was right," she said. "This is different." After she left, Maya found Claire standing at the appointment desk, not doing anything in particular. "You okay?" Maya asked. "Yes," Claire said. She picked up her phone. She texted Lucas one sentence. "I think I understand what the store is actually for now." He called her instead of texting back. "Tell me," he said. She told him about Patricia. She told him about the 90 minutes and the 4 items and the follow-up appointment. She told him about what Patricia had said at the door. He listened the whole way through without saying anything. When she was done, he said, "That is what you built, Claire. That's been there the whole time. You just moved somewhere small enough to see it." She was quiet for a moment. "I want to cry," she said. "I'm not going to because I'm at work, but I want to." "Cry at home," he said. "It's allowed. Thank you for answering, instead of texting back." "Some things need a voice," he said. She said, "I know." And then she said, "Tuesday." "Tuesday," he confirmed. That Saturday afternoon, a customer young, probably late, clearly there for the first time, was browsing near the front of the store when she overheard Maya mention the boutique's name to someone on the phone. The customer looked up and said, "Oh, is this the place that got saved by that big Charlotte agency? I read something about that online." Maya opened her mouth. Claire appeared from behind the display rack, where she had been rearranging a silk blouse that had been placed at the wrong angle. She looked at the young woman pleasantly. "The store wasn't waiting to be saved," she said. The customer blinked. "Oh, sorry, I just thought." "No, it's okay," Claire said, and she meant it. "We made some changes. Moved to a smaller space, focused on what we do best," she smiled. "We're better for it." The young woman looked around the boutique. "I can see that," she said. She picked up a linen jacket from the rack in front of her. "Can I try this on?" "Of course," Claire said. "The mirror by the window is the best one." After the customer left with the jacket, Maya came to stand beside Claire and said, in a low voice, "You almost said he helped you. I could see you almost say it." "He did help me," Claire said. But he didn't save me," she said. "There's a difference." Maya nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said, "there really is." That evening, Lucas came to the boutique after closing. Not for a session, those were finished, and everyone knew it. He came because Claire had called and said she wanted to show him something about the new layout before Maya changed it Monday morning. That was the reason she gave. He came through the front door, and Claire was at the register finishing the day's totals. And she didn't look up immediately, but she said, "Lock it behind you." He locked the door. He stood and waited. She finished the numbers, closed the register, set down her pen. She turned around. She looked at him in that direct, assessing way that he had come to understand was one of the truest things about her, the way she looked at things she was actually paying attention to. "I introduced you to someone today," she said. "Patricia?" "A different customer later." She paused. "She asked if you were my business consultant." He waited. "I said you were my boyfriend," she said. Something in his chest moved. "And how did that feel?" he asked. "True," she said. "It felt true." She crossed her arms, not defensively, thoughtfully. "I haven't introduced anyone as that in a long time. I wanted to make sure it felt right before I told you I'd done it." "Does it feel right?" he asked. She looked at him for a moment. "You came when I asked you to come. You stayed where I asked you to stay. You didn't cross the street when I was in there with my parents, even though I know." She paused. "I know what that cost you, because I know how you're built." "It was the right thing," he said. "I know," she said. "That's what I mean." She unfolded her arms. "You keep doing the right thing even when it's hard for you. You're not performing it, it's real." And she stopped. "I'm not going to perform being okay with trusting that. I'm just going to trust it." He crossed the room. He stopped in front of her. He did not ask this time, or rather he asked differently. He held out his hand, palm up, and waited. She put her hand in his. He held it. Just that. Just her hand in his. Standing in the closed boutique at the end of a Saturday that had been hard and good in the way all the best days are. "I'm going to mess this up sometime," she said. "I know," he said. "So am I, and you do. I'm going to tell you," she said. "Instead of packing a bag. And when you go quiet," he said, "I'm going to ask you what it means. Instead of making a spreadsheet." She looked up at him. "New agreement." "New agreement," he confirmed. She leaned her head against his shoulder, briefly, the way you lean against something you trust to hold. Then she straightened up and said, "Help me lock up." He did. They walked out together into the Saturday evening, and Lucas locked the boutique door with the key. Claire handed him the second key, the one she had made last week without announcing it, and he handed it back to her, and she put it in her coat pocket without ceremony. He did not say anything about the key. She did not explain it. Some things don't need to be explained. Some things just need to be handed over quietly, between two people who have finally decided to stop protecting themselves from each other. They walked to his car. He opened her door not because he thought she couldn't, but because he wanted to, and she got in and said, "Thank you," the way people say it when they mean more than the specific action. He went around to his side and got in and started the engine. "Pasta," she said. "I was thinking pasta," he said. "Good," she said. She turned to look out the window at the street, at the boutique they'd just locked, at the side street that was quieter and smaller, and more genuinely hers than anything she'd had before. Good. He pulled out into the street. At the first stoplight, she reached over without looking and turned up the radio, a small, unconscious thing, the kind of thing you only do in a car with someone you've stopped being careful around. The light turned green. He drove. And for the first time since the morning, she had packed a bag and walked past him in a hallway. Lucas Bennett was not thinking about the practical implications of the moment. He was not converting it into a checklist or a plan or a risk assessment. He was simply in it. Fully, quietly, without reservation. In it. 6 weeks after the move, on a Thursday evening in late June, Lucas came home from Charlotte and found his porch light on. He had left it on himself that morning. He knew that. But the sight of the warm yellow glow at the end of his street still made something tighten in his chest. A reflex, a memory, the body's way of holding on to the moments that changed everything. He parked in the driveway and sat for a second, and let himself remember. The bundle of fabric, the brass key, the confused, ashamed face that became, over the following weeks, the most honest face he had ever known. Then he got out of the car. Because she was there. Not on the porch step this time. Not asleep against the door. Not pale with exhaustion. Not holding her phone away from her parents' calls. Claire Monroe was sitting in one of the 2 wooden chairs he had added to the porch 3 weeks ago, her suggestion, delivered casually over pasta on a Tuesday, the way she delivered things she cared about, but didn't want to make into a production. "You should get 2 chairs out there," she'd said. "The porch looks like someone lives alone." He had ordered them the next morning. She was sitting in the left one, which was the one that creaked. She had a drink on the small table, between the chairs. There was a second drink beside it. Both phones were face down on the table. Lucas stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. She looked at him. She was not disheveled. She was not pale. She was wearing dark jeans and a linen shirt, her hair down, and she looked like a person who had come from a place she was glad to have left and arrived at a place she had chosen to be. "Hi," she said. He said, "Hi." He walked up the steps and sat in the right chair, the one that didn't creak. He picked up the second drink. Cold, she had timed his arrival. He looked at her. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 20 minutes, she said. Maya closed up. "I told her I had somewhere to be. And you came here." "I came here," she said. He settled into the chair. The evening was warm, the particular warmth of late June in the mountains that feels like a gift after the long cold. And the street was quiet the way his street got quiet after 7, not silent, but settled, the world doing its slow work of ending the day. He did not ask her what she needed. He did not ask if something was wrong. He had learned finally, genuinely learned, that not every arrival required a reason, and that the fastest way to make a person feel like a problem was to immediately ask what they needed solving. She picked up her drink. "Noah called me today," she said. Lucas raised an eyebrow. 4. "He wanted feedback on the spring campaign brief before he brought it to you," she said. "He said he trusted your judgment, but he wanted to make sure the customer insight was right before the strategy conversation." She paused. "He called me first, Lucas." The 26-year-old researcher with the good instincts called the retail consultant before he called his boss. Because he understood where the real information lived. Lucas was quiet for a moment. "What did you tell him?" "I told him his instinct about the first purchase moment was right, but he was starting the story too late," she said. The emotional entry point isn't when she picks up the product. It's the moment before, when she's deciding whether someone like her is even allowed in the store. She looked at him. "Sound familiar?" he said. "He took notes," she said. "He actually took notes while I was talking. Like I was someone worth quoting." "You are someone worth quoting," Lucas said. "I know that now," she said simply. And the way she said it, without performance, without apology, was so different from the woman who had sat in a stockroom 6 weeks ago and looked at her own business data, like it was a verdict against her. "I didn't always know it." "Neither did I," Lucas said. "Know your own value, I mean. It took me a long time to understand that giving credit to other people didn't make me less credible. It made the work better." She looked at him sideways. "Are you telling me you've grown as a person?" "I'm telling you that Noah is being promoted to lead researcher next month, and I'm putting it in writing that Claire Monroe's consulting work was foundational to the campaign that justified it." She stared at him. "You're putting my name in a document." "I'm putting your name in an official agency document," he said. "You built something worth crediting." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My mother called this morning." He waited. "She called the store," Claire said, "not my cell." "The store line." Like she was calling a business. She set her drink down, which I think was her way of signaling that she was calling to talk about me as a business owner, and not as a daughter she was disappointed in. "What did she say?" "She asked how the new location was performing," Claire said. Not sarcastically, she actually asked. And when I told her about the appointment numbers and Patricia and the new contract with your agency, she said. Claire stopped. She pressed her lips together, she said. That's smart, Claire. That's actually very smart. The silence between them was careful. 4 words, Claire said. After everything. 4 words. She looked at the darkening street. And I cried for 20 minutes after I hung up. Which I did not expect. Because you'd stopped waiting for it, Lucas said. She turned to look at him. Yes, she said. I had completely stopped waiting for it. And then it came, and I didn't know what to do with it. You cried for 20 minutes, he said. That seems like exactly the right thing to do with it. She laughed short, wet-eyed real. Yeah, she said. I guess it was. The chair creaked as she shifted her weight. She looked at it. Lucas watched her look at it. Still not fixed, she said. You told me not to fix it, he said. I know what I said. She settled back. I just like that you listened. She picked up her drink again. My father texted me this week. 2 family events in 1 week, Lucas said. What did Richard say, he said. The scarf was very well received, she said. Direct quote. The scarf was very well received. She shook her head slowly. That is my father telling me my taste is good, and my store sells quality merchandise, and he respects what I've built. In 11 words. About a scarf. How do you feel about that? Like I want to call him and say, I know what you meant, Dad. And also like I never want to explain to him that I know what he meant, because if I explain it, he'll feel exposed, and if he feels exposed, he'll retreat and we'll lose whatever this is. She exhaled. So I texted back I'm glad she liked it and left it at that. That was the right call, Lucas said. I know, she paused. It's exhausting being the emotionally intelligent one in a family of people who express love through commerce. He looked at her. Did you just describe yourself as the emotionally intelligent one? I have been in therapy for 4 months, she said. I'm allowed, he blinked. This was new information. You didn't tell me that. I'm telling you now, she met his eyes. I started seeing someone in March. Before the porch night, actually. Right after the thing with my mother at the boutique. She paused. I didn't say anything because I didn't want it to be a thing. And because honestly I was embarrassed. I'm almost 40. I felt like I should have figured this out by now. He said very carefully, does it help? Yes, she said. A lot. She's helping me understand why I leave before things can fall apart. She looked at him directly. So that I stopped doing it. He held her gaze. I'm glad you're going, he said. My therapist thinks you sound healthy. For what it's worth, Claire said. He raised both eyebrows. You talk about me. You're relevant to several themes, she said dryly. Don't get a big head about it. He laughed. An actual laugh, the kind that comes from being genuinely caught off guard by someone you love. The word registered in the back of his mind, and he let it stay there, love, without converting it into something more manageable. The street had gone fully quiet now. 1 car passed. Somewhere down the block, a screen door opened and closed. The ordinary sounds of people living their ordinary evenings. Can I ask you something? Claire said. Yes, the night I showed up here, she said. When you found me on the porch. What was the first thing you actually thought? Not what you said. What you thought. He considered the question. He had become, over the last 6 weeks, much more careful about the difference between those 2 things. I thought, something terrible has happened, he said. And then I recognized the dress, and then I thought. He paused. I thought she's here. That was it. Just she's here. And everything inside me organized itself around that fact like it had been waiting for it. She was quiet. What did you think, he said, when I woke you up? I thought I had made a catastrophic mistake, she said. I thought you were going to be kind about it in a distant way, and I was going to have to pretend that was fine. She looked at her hands. And then you said guest room or couch, and I thought, oh, he's going to make this okay, without making it into something. Is that why you called me 2 days later, he asked. Partly, she said. But also partly because I was at boutique looking at spreadsheets that didn't make sense. And I thought there is exactly one person who will help me understand these without making me feel stupid, and whose number I don't have memorized. And I was holding a piece of paper with his number written on it. She smiled. The universe was not being subtle. The universe rarely is, he said. The chair creaked again as she leaned slightly forward. She reached across the small table between them and turned her phone face up, looked at it, turned it face down again. He watched her do it. Everything okay, he asked. Maya sent a photo of tomorrow's window display, she said. It's wrong. She put the linen pieces behind silk, and the proportions are off, and I want to call her. She looked at her drink. But it's 8:30 at night, and she's been there since 8 in the morning, and she's going to fix it herself by tomorrow, because she knows. He waited. So I'm not calling, she said. I'm sitting here and I'm not calling. That's new, he said. That's very new, she confirmed. My therapist calls it tolerating imperfect outcomes. I call it extremely uncomfortable. But you're doing it. I'm doing it. She leaned back. The chair creaked. She let it creak. How was Charlotte? Long, he said. Whitmore wants to take the apparel campaign national in the fall. That's good news. It's complicated news, he said. Scaling something doesn't always keep what made it work in the first place. He paused. I told him we needed to protect the emotional core of the campaign before we talked about scope. He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. That sounds familiar, she said. I know, he said. I used to be him. She looked at him for a moment. What changed? He looked at her steadily. A woman in a floral dress was asleep on my porch, he said. And then she spent 3 sessions teaching me what a customer feels in the moment before they decide they're allowed to want something. He paused. It turned out to be applicable to more than marketing. She held his gaze. Something moved in her face, not surprise but recognition. The look of someone hearing a true thing said plainly. I'm staying for breakfast, she said. It was not a question. I know, he said. I have my own toothbrush here. 3rd drawer in the guest bathroom, he said. You put it there 5 weeks ago. I wondered if you'd noticed. I noticed immediately, he said. I didn't say anything because I didn't want you to feel like I was tracking it. She turned to look at him fully. Were you tracking it? I checked that drawer every morning for a week, he said, to make sure it was still there. Her expression did something complicated and then resolved into something simple and clear. She reached across the table again, and this time she didn't put her hand on his. She turned her palm up and waited. He put his hand in hers. She held it with a firmness that was different from tenderness, more fundamental than affection. It was the grip of someone who had made a decision and was inhabiting it completely. I need to tell you something, she said. Tell me. 3 weeks ago, I almost called my father, she said. About the plumbing problem at the new location. The quote was high, and the landlord was being difficult, and I picked up the phone and she stopped. I almost made the call that would have let him back in. Not through the front door. Through the side door. The money door. She looked at their joined hands. And I put the phone down. What did you do instead, he asked. I called my landlord back, she said, and I told him the quote was not acceptable, and I needed a new one by end of business or I would be contacting the property management company directly. She paused. He called back in 40 minutes, with a number 40% lower. Claire. I know, she said, I handled it by myself. She looked up. But I wanted you to know I almost didn't. Because I think it's important that you know I'm not. She searched for the word. I'm not fixed. I still have the instinct to reach for the wrong lifeline when I'm scared. So do I, he said. Last Tuesday, when you were 20 minutes late and not answering your phone, my first instinct was to call Maya and ask if you were okay. She stared at him. I did not call Maya, he said. That was the instinct. I sat with it for 11 minutes, and then you texted me from the parking lot, saying you'd been on a call that ran long. He paused. But I sat with it for 11 minutes, and it was genuinely unpleasant. She started to laugh, and then caught it, and then let it go. A full laugh, real and slightly helpless. We are both such works in progress, she said. Yes, he said, we are, and we're doing it anyway. We are doing it anyway, he confirmed. The creak of the chair settled into the quiet between them. Down the street, a neighbor's porch light flickered on. The evening had gone fully dark now, the mountains making night come softly in stages rather than all at once. Claire looked up at the sky. I was thinking about something this week, she said. Tell me, about the night I came here, she said. I keep thinking about why I chose your porch specifically. And I've been working through this in therapy. The real reasons, not just the surface reasons. She paused. And I think the truest answer is that you were the only person in my life who I had never needed to impress. He was very still. My parents needed me to succeed on their terms, she said. My employees needed me to be certain. My customers needed me to be confident. My friends needed me to be okay. She looked at him. But you were the person who already knew I wasn't always okay. You'd seen me at 3 in the morning, crying about inventory projections. You'd heard me pick fights that were actually about fear. You knew I left wet towels on the bathroom floor and kept library books too long and burned coffee when I was distracted." She stopped. "You already knew all of that, and you hadn't left yet. So when I had nowhere to go, I came to the place where I didn't have to perform being fine." He said, "I almost called you. After you left, I know," she said. "You told me not about that night," he said later. 2 weeks later. And then a month later. And then 6 months in, when it was 3 in the morning, and I'd been looking at our old photographs, which I know is pathetic, and I picked up the phone and I typed your name and then I put it down." He looked at her directly. "I put it down every time because I told myself you had made your choice and I was going to respect it." "I would have answered," she said quietly. "I didn't know that. I would have answered every time," she said. "I was waiting for you to call. And I was too proud to call first, and we were both sitting with our phones, not calling each other for 8 months. She shook her head slowly. "What a waste," he said. 8 months, she said. A silence. Not uncomfortable. The kind of silence that has weight and warmth to it. The kind that can only exist between people who have been honest enough with each other to stop needing words to fill every space. Then Claire said, "Can I stay?" The same 3 words. The same voice. His porch, the yellow light. The June evening instead of the April cold. Everything different. Everything the same. He looked at her, this woman, who had come back not because she was falling apart, but because she had put herself together and chosen where she wanted to be. She had her own apartment, her own store, her own second key on her key ring, the one she had made without announcing it. She had her therapist and her Maya and her carefully renegotiated relationship with her complicated parents. She had her balanced plan, and her appointment model, and her 14-month timeline, and her 43 donated dresses. She had everything she needed to leave. She was choosing to stay. "You can stay," he said. And she did. Not because she had nowhere else to go. Not because it was safe or practical or the only option available. She stayed because she had done the hardest thing any person can do. She had built a life she could stand in on her own 2 feet, and then she had looked at that life and decided she wanted to share it. She stayed through breakfast. He made coffee the right way, oat milk, no sugar. The way she actually took it now, and she sat at his kitchen counter with her feet on the rungs of the stool and told him about a customer who had cried in the fitting room on Wednesday and bought every single thing she tried on. And he told her about Noah's first presentation. The one where he'd spoken without notes for 15 minutes, and the client had started taking notes. The ceramic bowl sat on the counter between them, lopsided and deliberate, and exactly where it was always supposed to be. The following Tuesday they went to dinner at a place on Lexington, not the boutique block, a different part of the street, and they argued mildly about whether the salmon was overcooked, and agreed completely that the dessert menu was not negotiable. And Claire's phone buzzed 3 times with boutique questions, and she answered 2 of them and let the 3rd one wait. And Lucas did not check his email once. Walking back to his car, Claire took his hand without looking at him. The natural, unconscious way of someone who has stopped performing comfort and started living it. He held on. The porch chair still creaked. He never fixed it. Some mornings he sat in it alone with his coffee and listened to it announce his way to the quiet street, and he thought about what she had said. "I trust it 'cause it tells the truth," and he thought that this was what he wanted the rest of his life to sound like. Not the performance of certainty, not the management of fear. The honest creak of a thing that is bearing weight and is not afraid to say so. They were not a perfect story. They were 2 people who had hurt each other with silence and pride, and the particular cruelty of loving someone while refusing to be vulnerable with them. They were 2 people who had wasted 8 months and found each other again, not because the universe was romantic, but because they had both, separately and painfully, done enough work on themselves to be worth finding. They said when they were afraid. They did not solve each other without permission. They protected Tuesday evenings with a seriousness that their colleagues found slightly baffling and their closer friends found quietly inspiring. They asked instead of assuming. They stayed instead of leaving. They chose each other not once in a dramatic moment on a porch, but every ordinary day after it in cold coffee and wrong turns and 11-minute silences, and the persistent, unglamorous, completely irreplaceable work of being truly known by another person and staying anyway. That was not a rescue story. It was something better than that. It was 2 people building a place that belonged to both of them, and choosing it every single day for no other reason than that they wanted to. and that wanting, freely given, without desperation or debt was the only kind of love worth having. There is a question that Lucas found himself thinking about on a Saturday morning, about 3 months after Claire had first appeared on his porch. He was sitting in the creaky chair, alone. Claire was at the boutique, a weekend appointment, a client who could only come in on Saturdays. She had kissed him on the cheek before she left and taken her coffee in a travel cup and told him not to wait on breakfast. He had waited on breakfast anyway, because that was the kind of thing he had started doing without thinking about it. The small, unannounced acts of care that nobody puts in a contract, but that constitute the actual fabric of a shared life. And sitting there, in the chair that announced every shift of his weight with its honest creak, he found himself thinking about what love actually is. Not what it looks like in the stories people tell. Not what it feels like in the first weeks, when everything is momentum and electricity and the terrifying brightness of new feeling. What it actually is, underneath all of that, when the momentum settles and the electricity becomes something quieter and you are left with another human being on an ordinary Saturday morning, and you have to decide, again, who you want to be. He had been wrong about love for a very long time. He understood that now. He had believed, without quite putting it into words, that love was something you demonstrated through competence, that caring for someone meant solving their problems. That being useful was the same thing as being present. He had built an entire architecture of emotional life. Around this belief, the early phone calls answered, logistics managed, the crises handled with calm efficiency, and he had called it love, and he had meant it, and he had been genuinely confused when it was not enough. What he had not understood was the difference between fixing someone and seeing them. Fixing says, you have a problem and I have a solution, and my solution is the proof of my feeling for you. Seeing says, you are a complete person, and I am paying attention, and I trust you to know what you need. The first one feels like love. It can feel intensely like love. But it is built on a subtle foundation of superiority. The fixer is always, by definition, above the fixed. And people who are loved that way eventually feel it. They feel the invisible architecture of it. They feel that they are being helped and helped and helped until the help itself becomes a kind of weight, a debt that compounds, a reminder that someone else always seems to know better. Claire had felt that. Not from Lucas alone, from everyone in her life in different forms. Her father with his financial leverage. Her mother with her geographic ambitions. The well-meaning friends who always had a plan. Even Lucas, who had genuinely tried, had fallen into the pattern, had organized her crisis, solved her spreadsheets, wanted to cross the street when her parents were inside the boutique making her life difficult. The difference was that Lucas had caught himself, had felt the impulse and recognized it for what it was, had stayed on the sidewalk, had waited in the coffee shop, had handed her the 3 financial plans and refused to choose between them, had said every time the impulse rose, this is not my decision to make. And in doing so, he had given her something more valuable than any solution he could have provided. He had given her the experience of her own competence. That, Lucas had come to believe, was the deepest form of love available to one adult human being for another. Not the rescue, not the solution. The patient, deliberate act of witnessing someone solve their own problem, and then stepping aside so the victory belongs entirely to them. This was harder than fixing, harder than anyone acknowledges. Because fixing feels productive. It feels like love in real time. You can see it working, you can measure the result, you can tell yourself you made a difference. Waiting while someone figures it out themselves feels passive, feels like withholding, feels sometimes like a betrayal of the very instinct that makes you want to help in the first place. But it is not passive. It is one of the most active choices a person can make. It is the choice to trust another person's capacity more than your own need to feel needed. Claire had taught him the other side of this. She had walked into his house 8 months after leaving it and asked for exactly what she needed and nothing more. She had said, 3 sessions, specific parameters, no personal entanglement, no loans. She had built a fence around the collaboration and maintained it not because she didn't trust Lucas, but because she didn't yet trust herself. Didn't trust that she could accept help without letting it become dependency. Didn't trust that she could be vulnerable without disappearing into the vulnerability. What she had been learning, in the hardest possible school, was the difference between needing someone and choosing someone. Needing is involuntary. It is the midnight porch, the desperation, the brass key clutched in a sleeping hand because there is nowhere else to go. Needing is real and it is human, and there is no shame in it. But it is not a foundation. A relationship built entirely on need is built on scarcity, on the fear of what happens when the need is no longer acute. When the crisis passes, and the person who came to you desperate is standing on their own 2 feet again, and you have to find out whether what exists between you can survive the absence of emergency. Choosing is something else entirely. Choosing is what Claire did when she sat in the creaky chair with her own drink already poured, having come from her own apartment and her own store, and her own rebuilt life, and said, "Can I stay?" Choosing is the decision made in the presence of alternatives. It is love as an act of will rather than necessity. It is the most honest form of wanting, because it cannot be explained away as having no option. Luke had needed to learn both sides of this. He had to learn to let himself be chosen without immediately trying to make himself indispensable. He had to resist the old architecture, the impulse to be so useful, so competent, so comprehensively helpful that leaving him would feel logistically impossible. He had to sit with the terrifying possibility that Claire might rebuild her life and look at him and decide she didn't need him after all, and trust that what they had was strong enough to survive her, not needing him. It was, because she chose him anyway, and that choice freely made, without desperation, in full possession of every alternative, was worth more than any amount of need could ever be. There is something else Lucas had been wrong about, and it took him longer to admit. He had believed that emotional strength meant not being afraid, that the composed man in the doorway while his girlfriend packed her bag was demonstrating resilience, that converting terror into a calm conversation about internet account transfers was a form of grace under pressure. It was not. It was a performance of strength that was actually a form of abandonment. He had been so afraid of being seen afraid that he had left her alone in the room with her own fear, and she had interpreted his absence as evidence that she didn't matter enough to frighten him. Fear, it turns out, is not the opposite of love. It is one of love's clearest expressions. The things that terrify us are the things we cannot afford to lose. And refusing to show that terror, wrapping it in competence, hiding it in spreadsheets, converting it into action items, does not protect the people we love. It simply ensures they never know how much they matter. This was the lesson that had cost him 8 months. Say it when you're afraid. Not because it is comfortable, not because it resolves anything, but because the person across from you deserves to know that you are afraid, because your fear is the evidence of your love, and withholding it is a form of lying that neither of you can afford. Claire had her own version of this lesson, and it was the one she carried into therapy and worked on with a patience and rigor that Lucas found genuinely humbling. She had learned to leave before she could be left. This was so deeply programmed into her that she had done it without knowing she was doing it, had felt the first tremor of potential loss and moved, quickly and decisively, toward the exit. Had packed the bag before the conversation could become the thing she was afraid it would become. Had told herself that leaving on her own terms was better than being left on someone else's. What she had not understood was that this strategy, which felt like self-protection, was actually a preemptive destruction. She was ending things that hadn't ended yet. She was treating her own fear as a verdict. She was choosing the pain she knew, the clean pain of departure, over the uncertain, uncontrollable pain of staying and finding out what happened next. The work she had done, the real work, was learning to tolerate the uncertainty, to stay in the room when her instinct said run, to ask what something meant instead of deciding she already knew. To trust that she was strong enough to survive whatever happened if she stayed, and that the only way to find out was to stop leaving before the question was answered. She had chosen to stay, not in the story's first desperate night, but in every subsequent day, when staying required no desperation and all the courage she had. Lucas thought about all of this on his Saturday morning, in the creaky chair, with cold coffee and the sound of his quiet street. He thought about what love had looked like to him at 25, at 35, at 43, and how different it looked now. At 25, it had been electricity and urgencies, and the feeling of someone completing a sentence you'd been saying your whole life. At 35, it had been partnership and logistics and the efficient organization of a shared life. At 43, on a Tuesday night, over imperfect pasta, with a woman who was working as hard on herself as she was on her business, it was something that had no single word but felt like, this person is real, and I am real, and we have agreed to keep showing up for each other, without requiring either of us to be more than we are. That was it. That was the whole of it. Not completion. Not rescue. Not the dramatic salvation of a person's sleep on a porch. But the daily, unglamorous, infinitely renewable decision to be honest with each other, to give each other room to fail and recover, to protect Tuesday evenings and say the afraid things out loud and never, not once, use work as a place to hide from the person who deserves to find you. Claire came home at noon. He heard her car in the driveway. He did not get up from the creaky chair. He heard the door of her car close, heard her steps on the path, heard the particular sound of someone who knows a house well enough to move through its approach without hesitation. She came up the porch steps. She looked at him in the chair and at the second chair beside him and at the 2 empty mugs on the table. She sat down. Appointment went long, she said. I figured, he said. She cried. She said the client. Happy crying. She picked up her empty mug and set it back down. She said it was the first time in 2 years she'd felt like herself in her own clothes. He looked at her. The way the morning was sitting on her face, the particular satisfaction of a person who had done exactly the work they were meant to do. That's what it's for, he said. That's what it's for, she agreed. She reached across and took his hand. The chair creaked once as she settled her weight. She let it creak. He let it creak. They sat there together in the honest sound of 2 people who have stopped pretending to be anything other than exactly what they are, imperfect, trying, afraid sometimes, choosing each other anyway. And if anyone had asked Lucas Bennett on that Saturday morning what love is, he would not have given them the answer he would have given 5 years ago, or 10, or 20. He would have said, love is the creaky chair that tells the truth. Love is the second drink already poured. Love is staying on the sidewalk when every instinct says cross the street. Love is saying I am afraid before the silence becomes something the other person has to interpret alone. Love is not the rescue. It was never the rescue. Love is what you build in the space between 2 people who have both decided, clearly and without coercion, that they would rather be known than be safe. That is all it is. That is everything it is.